Good evening, dear students. So today I am going to teach you here shoulder complex part 4, that is your glenohumeral joint. In previous lectures I have already explained three of the joints of the shoulder complex, namely sternoclavicular joint, acromioclavicular joint and scapulothoracic joint. So let us start with So here are the contents of the glenohumeral joint. As you can see on the screen, the glenohumeral joint is divided into 11 points or headings, you can say. First we will look after type of joint, degree of freedom, articular surface, angulations, stability, mobility, static stabilization of GH joint, dynamic stabilization of GH joint, scapulohumeral rhythm, muscles, and then joint pathology at last. So now what I am going to do here, if I am going to teach you all these 11 points together, it will be overburden for you. So what I have planned, I am going to divide this 11 points into other lectures. So for example, in this lecture we are going to deal till stability part, and in other lecture we will be dealing about mobility, static and dynamic, and one separate lecture will be there for scapulohumeral rhythm, and in last lecture of shoulder complex we will deal with the muscles related to shoulder joint and joint pathology. So here is the image for shoulder joint. As on left side, this is our humerus bone, this is our scapula bone. In scapula, this is our glenoid fossa, this is our head of humerus. So if there is a articulation between head of humerus and glenoid fossa, that joint is known as glenohumeral joint. And apart from that, in previous lecture we have already discussed about AC joint, that is acromioclavicular, and one more joint which will come on this side attached with the sternum, that is sternoclavicular joint, and one joint will be posterior. Once here rib cage will come with the attachment of scapula, that will be termed as scapulothoracic joint. Shoulder joint, as you can see here, type of joint, it is a ball and socket joint. Why ball and socket? Because here ball is going to behave as your head of humerus and socket is our glenoid fossa, so that's why it is termed as ball and socket joint. Even ball means head of humerus is our convex surface and socket, glenoid fossa, is our concave surface. Coming to next, degree of freedom, it is having 3 degree of freedom, means flexion and extension, adduction abduction and internal and external rotation. Coming to next point, that is our articular surface. We can divide the articular surface into proximal and distal part. So in proximal, the structure which is present is glenoid fossa of scapula. Proximal means towards the body, towards the midline of body. Distal means away from the midline of the body. So distal, we are having head of humerus. If you see, this is our glenoid fossa of scapula, and here will come our head of humerus. So head of humerus is present on the distal side and glenoid fossa of scapula is present on the proximal side. Next, let us discuss something about the facts of the glenoid fossa. If we see some of the facts of glenoid fossa, so it is considered that glenoid fossa is tilted slightly upward, you can say as orientation. What is the orientation of glenoid fossa in our body when it is going to be considered regarding shoulder joint? So it is slightly upward and it may be anteverted or retroverted with a degree of 10 degree and 6 to 7 degree respectively. Next, the radius of curvature of fossa is increased by articular cartilage that is thinner in the middle and thicker on the periphery, which is going to improve the congruence with the much larger radius of curvature of the humeral head. What does it mean? If you see this is the glenoid fossa, and here will be head of the humerus. So what they are trying to say, that radius of curvature of fossa will be increased by one articular cartilage that will be thin in the middle part, and that will be more thicker on the periphery part, so it can stabilize the head of the humerus properly. Next, now coming to the orientation of head of humerus. Humeral head has an articular surface that is larger than that of proximal glenoid articular surface, which forms 1/3 to 1/2 of a sphere. Now orientation, the head of the humerus faces medially, superiorly and posteriorly with regard to the shaft of the humerus and humeral condyles to provide the greater stability to shoulder complex. Next, angulations. There are two angles which can be seen in the shoulder complex. First one, angle of inclination. Second, angle of torsion. So let us discuss about first angle of inclination. What is angle of inclination? I will show you diagram after this slide. So an axis through the humeral head and neck. So we are going to draw first axis from humeral head and neck in relation to a longitudinal axis through the shaft of the humerus. So as all of you are aware, to make an angle, two lines are required in an angle. So one line is coming from humeral head and neck, another line is coming from longitudinal axis through the shaft of the humerus. They forms an angle. That angle is known as angle of inclination of the humerus, and the normal value of that angle of inclination in humerus is around approximately 130 to 150 degree. So if you see here in this image, as one line is going to come from the center of the humeral head and neck, another line will be on the longitudinal axis of the shaft of the humerus, where these two lines are going to coincide each other. On the medial side, they will be forming an angle. That angle is known as angle of inclination, and normal value ranges from 130 to 150 degree. Next angle, angle of torsion. Next angle is angle of torsion. So the axis through the, again, the axis through the humeral head and neck in relation to axis through the humeral condyles forms an angle known as the angle of torsion, and the approximately value is around 30 degree. So what they are trying to say here, if we consider this is a head of, this is our humerus bone, just consider, and down will be the condyles. So what you are supposed to do, make a line from the center of head and neck and extend this line to back. Make another axis from the axis through the humeral condyles and extend it where they are going to coincide with each other. That angle will be known as angle of torsion. So you can see here in this diagram, this is the superior view of the humerus bone. So one line is going to come from the center of the head and neck, which is going to be extended. Another line down, as it is a superior view, down these are the condyles, medial and lateral condyle. Take an axis from the condyles of the humerus and extend that line. So this angle will be termed as angle of torsion, and value will be approximately around 30 degree. So one of the important structure which is going to provide the depth to the glenoid fossa is our glenoid labrum. So what it is, the total available articular surface of glenoid fossa is enhanced by an accessory structure that is known as glenoid labrum, and this structures surround and it is attached to periphery of glenoid fossa. It is going to be attached to the periphery, outer border of the glenoid fossa, and henceforth it is going to give 50% of depth to the glenoid fossa to form a shoulder complex or shoulder joint and to provide the stability. and this glenoid labrum is made up of dense fibrous connective tissue with little fibrocartilage. You can see here in this image this white color structure. This is known as glenoid labrum, which will be fixed here on the periphery of the glenoid fossa of scapula, providing 50% of depth for the articulation of head of humerus to form shoulder joint. Coming to the last topic of the part 4 is stability. In stability, we are going to look after glenohumeral capsules and ligaments, which are going to provide the stability to the shoulder joint. So they are capsule, superior glenohumeral ligament, GH is representing glenohumeral, middle glenohumeral ligament, inferior glenohumeral ligament, coracohumeral ligament, and transverse humeral ligament. So actually the GH ligament, the glenohumeral ligament, is divided into 3 divisions, that is superior, middle and inferior. Apart from that, we have coracohumeral ligament and transverse humeral ligament. So first structure of stability is capsule. So entire glenohumeral joint is surrounded by a large but loose capsule that is taut superiorly. Taut means that is tight superiorly, and slack. Slack means loose. So where it is slack, or you can say loose, in the anterior and inferior in the resting position, when our hand is in resting position. So if you see in this image, the capsule is somewhat likely to cover the shoulder complex, and it is a large capsule, but it is loose from which part? From anterior part and inferior part, but it is tight or taut from the superior part. So that's why it can prevent the superior dislocation of the shoulder joint. Next, discussing about the ligaments. As already I have told you that glenohumeral ligament is divided into 3 parts, that is superior glenohumeral ligament, middle glenohumeral ligament, inferior glenohumeral ligament. Apart from that, we have coracohumeral ligament and transverse humeral ligament. Now if we see in the diagram, so this is our superior glenohumeral ligament, as you can see the name. Next will be our middle, and last will be our inferior glenohumeral ligament. Another ligament which is coming from coracoid to humerus, that will be termed as coracohumeral ligament. Another ligament which is going to bridge the lesser tubercle and greater tubercle, that ligament will be known as transverse humeral ligament. Now let us see the transverse section of the glenoid fossa. If we see this image, this is our coracoid process, this is our acromion process, and this is our scapula bone. Now, and this whole surrounding structure is glenoid fossa, where certain muscles, tendons, capsules are present. Now as all of you know, there is one muscle which is known as, termed as rotator cuff muscles, and we have a mnemonic for that, that is termed as SITS, S-I-T and S. There is a mnemonic SITS. S represents supraspinatus, I infraspinatus, T teres minor, and S is for subscapularis. Now if you see here, this is our supraspinatus. So as it is rotator cuff, so it should cover the full glenoid fossa. So first is supraspinatus, second infraspinatus, third teres minor, and fourth subscapularis. So that's why they are termed as rotator cuff, because they cover the whole shoulder joint around the glenoid fossa and termed as rotator cuff muscles. Plus you can see here ligaments of glenohumeral. This is superior, middle and inferior ligament. Now again, inferior ligament is divided into three parts. First part is anterior band, second is axillary pouch, and third is posterior band. So we will discuss these ligaments in detail further. There is one important structure that is known as foramen of Whitebread. This is one of the thin area of capsule which is present in between superior and middle glenohumeral ligament, which is known as foramen of Whitebread, is a particular point of weakness in the capsule. Although the capsule is reinforced anteriorly by the subscapularis tendon, still this is termed as point of weakness which is present in between superior and middle glenohumeral ligament, and this area is commonly considered as from here we can have the chance of humeral head with anterior dislocation. So let us see where is the foramen of Whitebread. So as you can see, this is our coracoid process. This is our head of humerus or humerus bone. Now the ligament which is coming from coracoid to the humerus, it will be termed as coracohumeral, then superior glenohumeral ligament, middle glenohumeral ligament, and inferior glenohumeral ligament. As already we have discussed, inferior glenohumeral ligament is again divided into three parts, that is anterior portion, axillary portion, and posterior portion. So this will be our anterior portion, this will be our axillary portion, and this will be our posterior portion. Now foramen of Whitebread, as is it present between superior glenohumeral ligament and middle glenohumeral ligament, which is known as relatively zone or point of weakness. Now coming to one of the important structure of shoulder complex, that is rotator interval capsule. This rotator interval capsule is formed by superior glenohumeral ligament, superior capsule, and coracohumeral ligament, and they all are interconnected structures which are going to bridge the space between two muscles. They are supraspinatus and subscapularis, forming rotator interval capsule. So if you see here in diagram, here is our coracohumeral ligament, then we will be having our superior glenohumeral capsule and ligament. So collectively this area is here, you can see in this coracohumeral ligament and superior glenohumeral capsule, even superior glenohumeral ligament, they all are interconnected to each other, and they are present in between. If you see here, which muscles? Supraspinatus, this whole area is supraspinatus muscle, and down is our subscapularis. So they are present in between, or you can term they are going to bridge the area between the subscapularis and supraspinatus, termed as rotator interval capsule. So superior glenohumeral ligament. Superior glenohumeral ligament starts from where? From the superior glenoid labrum to the upper neck of the humerus, deep to the coracohumeral ligament. Already we have discussed in the diagram. Middle glenohumeral ligament, it runs obliquely from superior anterior labrum to the anterior aspect of the proximal humerus below the superior glenohumeral ligament attachment. Next, inferior glenohumeral ligament. As already I have explained you in diagram that inferior glenohumeral ligament complex is, we can term IGHLC, inferior glenohumeral ligament complex, divided into three parts: anterior band, axillary pouch, and posterior band. You can remember this mnemonic by the term Aam Aadmi Party, AAP, just for fun. Now here via 4 to 5 diagrams, we are going to discuss how and which and when which ligament is going to work. Which ligament is going to work in which position of the shoulder joint, means when our joint is in at rest position, or when our joint is going in 45 degree of abduction or 90 degree of abduction with rotation. It can be internal or external. And during that time, which ligament is going to work and it is going to provide which type of function. So first we are going to discuss about the glenohumeral ligament at rest. At rest means when the body is at static position, means shoulder complex. Now during this time, as you can see in the diagram, this is our superior glenohumeral, middle glenohumeral and inferior glenohumeral ligament complex. So here what is happening during at rest? Superior glenohumeral ligament and associated rotator interval capsule structures, already we have discussed, they contribute to anterior and inferior stability by limiting anterior and inferior translation of humeral head when the arm is at side. So what does it means? When shoulder is at rest, the ligament which is more taut, that is superior glenohumeral ligament. Apart from that, rotator interval capsule, which provides anterior and inferior stability. During that time, the other two ligaments, they are lax, they are loose, that is IGHLC and middle glenohumeral ligament. So when body or joint is at rest, the working mechanism is done by which ligament? That is superior glenohumeral ligament and components of a rotator interval capsule. Second, when joint is at 45 degree of humeral abduction with neutral rotation. So during this time, if you see the image, this ligament is lax, even this ligament is lax. Only the ligament which in image you can see taut is middle glenohumeral ligament. So obvious, middle glenohumeral ligament is going to contribute primarily for anterior stability by limiting same anterior humeral translation when arm is at 45 degree of abduction with neutral rotation. Third, now range of motion is increased. Now there is 90 degree of humeral abduction but still neutral rotation. Now if you see the two ligaments which are lax, that is superior and middle, and the taut ligament is inferior glenohumeral ligament complex. If you have seen properly the images in A and B diagram, we started with superior, then middle. Now the role is going to be done by inferior ligament. So with abduction beyond 45 degree, with combined abduction, adduction and rotation, the IGHLC, that is inferior glenohumeral ligament complex, plays the major role of stabilization and resist inferior humeral head translation. Next, now what will happen during 90 degree of humeral abduction with external rotation? Now this movement is known as external rotation. Still the joint is at 90 degree but with addition of external rotation. So still these two ligaments are lax. So still the ligament working is inferior ligament. But which part of inferior ligament? Let us see. With subsequent humeral external rotation from abducted position, the anterior band, which band of inferior ligament? Anterior band fans out to provide anterior stability and resistance to anterior humeral translation. Coming to the last. Now during 90 degree of humeral abduction and medial rotation, so this is medial rotation. So now again the ligament which is going to work is inferior only, but which part of inferior ligament? So with humeral abduction and medial rotation, posterior band of inferior ligament fans out and provides posterior stability and resistance to posterior humeral translation. Now coming to another important structure in the shoulder complex, that is our coracohumeral ligament. So what is coracohumeral ligament? As already we have discussed, the coracohumeral ligament, it will start from coracoid process till the head of the humerus. So coracohumeral ligament originates from the base of the coracoid process and may be defined as having two bands. So it will originate from the base of the coracoid process and it will have two bands. The first band will insert into the edge of the supraspinatus and onto the greater tubercle, where it is going to join with another ligament, that is superior glenohumeral ligament. So if this is, we can consider first band. So like this, it is going to be starting from the coracoid process and going till greater tubercle of humerus. In between, it is going to attach with supraspinatus and even it is going to attach with the superior glenohumeral ligament. Another band, the other band inserts into subscapularis and lesser tubercle. So another band, again it will start from coracoid and it is going to insert on the lesser tubercle and it is going to be in contact with subscapularis muscle. So what they are going to do, the two bands, they are going to form a tunnel underpass through which the tendon of the long head of biceps brachii passes. And what is the function of this coracohumeral ligament? It is going to limit inferior translation of humeral head in dependent arm, means during resting position. Now let us discuss about coracoacromial arch. As the name suggests, coracoacromial means coracoid process and acromion process. In between that, they are going to form a arch that is known as coracoacromial arch. So this is coracoid process, acromion process. So this formation will be termed as coracoacromial arch. So the coracoacromial arch is formed by coracoid process anteriorly, acromion process posteriorly, and one important ligament, that is coracoacromial ligament superiorly. So what they have told, anteriorly structure is there, coracoid process, posterior structure is there, acromion, superior structure is there, that is known as coracoacromial ligament from coracoid to acromion. So these three structures are going to form a arch which is termed as coracoacromial arch. Even it can be termed as osteoligamentous arch over the humeral head, because osteo means bone. There is, in these three structures, bones are there, even ligaments. Now even they can be termed as subacromial space. Sub means below. So this arch can be termed as subacromial space, the space below the acromion process, or area between the humeral head and coracoacromial arch also can be termed as suprahumeral space. Supra means above. This space is present above humerus, or supraspinatus outlet, because from this tunnel the muscle which is passing, that is supraspinatus. So how many names we got here? First, coracoacromial arch. Second, osteoligamentous arch. Third, subacromial space. And fourth, suprahumeral space or supraspinatus outlet. Now coming to the functions of coracoacromial arch. Coracoacromial arch is going to cover the humeral head and it is going to form a space within which the subacromial bursa, rotator cuff tendon, and a portion of long head of biceps brachii is going to come. Means under the coracohumeral arch, these three structures are present mainly: subacromial bursa, rotator cuff tendon, and a portion of long head of biceps brachii. So the coracoacromial arch protects these structures from direct trauma from above direction. And these trauma how can occur? Such trauma is relatively common and can occur through such simple daily tasks, for example, carrying a heavy bag over the shoulder. And even the arch also prevents the head of humerus from dislocating superiorly. Coming to the last part of the stability part, that is bursae. The most important bursa which is present in shoulder complex is subacromial and subdeltoid. These bursa separate the supraspinatus tendon and head of the humerus from which area or bone? Acromion, coracoid process, and even ligament, that is coracoacromial ligament and deltoid muscles. And the bursa may be separate but are commonly termed, they are collectively together. That's why it can be termed as subacromial bursa. Function: the subacromial bursa permits smooth gliding between the humerus and supraspinatus tendon and surrounding structures. If there is any interruption or failure of this gliding mechanism, it is going to cause pain and limitation of glenohumeral motion. So if you see here in diagram, this is our bursa. So as it is present below the acromion process, so it will be termed as subacromial bursa, and if it is present below the deltoid muscle, it will be termed as subdeltoid bursa, and they are going to be collectively throughout connection is there. So collectively to these two bursa we can term as subacromial bursa. Now what is subacromial bursitis? If the word itis is there in any of the word, means inflammation. So subacromial bursitis is inflammation of subacromial bursa, and it is most commonly secondary to inflammation or degeneration of the supraspinatus tendon. So thank you for listening. Next class we are going to discuss about mobility part of the shoulder